When the season started, I guess we were all hoping we'd have crops that look like that. Not too much rain, no floods, but just a nice soybean crop. It's panned out a little different, but I guess a lot of what I'm talking about will hold when we get back to a better year, when bugs are at the foremost of our thoughts and we're not worried about drought. I was told I had to put a train slide in. I wanted to find one with angst. That's someone punching the lights out of the locomotive. He's actually cleaning the headlights, but I thought it made a good story. We've got a new calculator that will be online shortly with assistance from the technical boffins in Toowoomba. The calculator will make for easier calculation of thresholds because there are a lot of complicating factors you don't really want to know about, but you want your thresholds to encompass those, so you've got a reasonably accurate prediction of the damage potential and the economic loss in your crop. And we've got a new threshold model for crushing beans. In the past, we just had an old simple double the edible threshold rule. That applies in some circumstances, in a lot of circumstances it doesn't. So with computer modelling, we're able to do that and bring that to you in an easy-to-use form. And there's a multitude of factors, so crop yield, mean seed weight, crop value, the edible bonus, hopefully you get a good bonus, crushing bean penalties, time to harvest, cost of control, and you're probably feeling a bit of angst already at the thought of all of those. And on top of that you add the different species, so you've got 5 major species of pod-sucking bugs and all the immature stages thereof, and it's their combined impact that impacts your crop, their damage potential. So you need to factor that in as well. Just a little bit on the dynamics during the season. Typically in this part of the world, when you get to flowering, you'll have a low population coming in, and that population increases exponentially as you approach the R8, the 10 pod stage, and as your crop dries down, the population decreases. But the damage is inflicted over quite a lengthy period of time, over 48 days from early pod fill through into this pod maturation phase. So that you've got a risky period, but bear in mind that the threshold is very low, but it's influenced by bug damage over a long period of time. So if you delay slightly, 3 or 4 days, you're not going to lose your crop. Most of your damage will be at that latter end of the pod growing cycle. Other issue that often comes up is nymphs. People will see in flowering beans, say sometimes quite large numbers of small nymphs. Those nymphs really don't develop until your pods start to fill, and the damage potential of small nymphs is very low indeed, unless they develop through to adulthood. But in those early stages, a lot of the nymphs aren't progressing through because the flowers are not a suitable food source. Measuring the damage potential of your population. Now we'll have two. We'll have an advanced option and a less advanced one. I've shown you the advanced. So how many people here would be confident in identifying the 5 instars of green vegetable bug? Or how many would be happier going small, medium and large bugs? Can we have a show of hands? I saw some learned colleagues at the back even put their hand up, so I guess that... You'll see something like this on the screen when you get it. You just add the number of each stage. They convert everything to green vegetable bug adult equivalents. So that's the standard unit of measure for your thresholds. If you have, say, some red-banded shield bugs there, they get included in the equation and it totals everything up for you. So you just add the number, don't worry about the maths, it does it for you all in the background. For edible soybeans, now this is the easy threshold. You'll add 3% damage max, and above that you get penalised. You can lose your edible bonus, and that bonus can be typically $50 to $100 a tonne. Some years it's less, depending on the supply of beans. And the bonus lost is many times greater than the cost of control. We can represent that graphically. So these 2 lines here, the horizontal ones, are independent of yield. That's the cost of control. It might be anything, $10, $15, $20, $25 a hectare. That's the bonuses for varying magnitude of bonuses, so it's so much a tonne. So if you've got a bonus of $50 a tonne and 5 tonne hectare yield, you're getting $250 a hectare. And you can see that is way greater than the cost of control. So to manage your risk in that situation, you're taking action before you get to the threshold. So we've got what we call an action threshold, and that's represented graphically. So that white line there is the 3% damage limit, but you don't want to go over that, so we're suggesting you take action at the 2% level. And the threshold is directly proportional to the yield, so if you've got a crop with 4 tonnes a hectare, your threshold is twice as big as a 2 tonne a hectare crop. So best practice agronomy is an IPM measure, because the higher yielding your crop, the more tolerant it is of bug attack. Agreed, Mr. McIntosh. But all your crops would be up at that high level. Yes. Mean seed weight has an impact. Now, there will be similar models for mung beans, but this doesn't apply to the mung beans. For soybeans, where you can go from natto beans with a mean seed weight of about 7 grams per 100 seeds up to bunya with 27 grams per 100 seeds, that influences the rate of bug damage. You don't need to know the maths behind that, but that needs to be incorporated in the model, and the model does do that. So the crushing ones, the edible ones, are quite simple relatively. For crushing beans, there's no penalties, again, up to 3% damage. But for every 1% damage above 3% and up to 6%, you get a 1% reduction in crop value. Sounds complicated. You don't want to be doing that on the back of an envelope. All in agreement. For every 1% damage above 6% up to 9, you get a 2% reduction. So once you get above 6%, things are hotting up. And once you get to 10% damage, you get total rejection. So we've got to factor in all those factors into the model. What does it look like graphically? That's yield. So remember, the higher the yield, the higher the threshold. That's the critical 3% level, whether you're growing crushing or edibles. That's the 2% edible action limit. That's the old crushing threshold, which we had, and it's based on US extension, based on twice the edible threshold. That's the 6% level above which the rate of penalty increases for when you're going for crushing beans. And the red line, of course, is the 10% total rejection. You don't want to be near there. And when we do the maths on it, that's the type of model for if you had the cost of control was $10 a hectare and you had say a Hayman variety with, that's the mean seed weight, and crop value of $500 a tonne, that's the model. So you can see it's the rate of damage at threshold, and the threshold is the break-even point. So the crushing threshold behaves quite differently. For all those points there, the cost of control equals the value of the penalty. So you can see very early on, it's the rate of damage you can tolerate is much higher, and it decreases as the yield increases. And that's just the way the maths work out. Again, you don't want to be developing graphs like that on the back of an envelope. Agreement? Because we can put in different cost of control scenarios. So you can see the higher the cost of control, the higher the threshold. And you've got a problem here. Because if you've got a high cost of control and a low yield, the threshold is dangerously close to that 10% level. So even the model, even though the economic rationalists say, yeah, you can tolerate up to there, in absolute terms, your bug population is getting perilously close to there. You don't want to be there, do you? So in the threshold models, we can write into the equations, just cap it at a maximum of 6% damage. And similarly, if you've got a low cost of control and a high yield, your threshold is less than that 3% level, and it's behaving more like an edible threshold. So it means if you've got a lowish cost of control, and probably with SPs that would be the case at present, and you've got a high yielding crop, you want to be on the ball, and yeah, you don't want to jeopardise your potential crop value, because in these scenarios here, the damage penalty you're going to get is more than the cost of control. So you're taking you don't want to get to that 3% level. And we can do scenarios for different crop values. So you can see it's getting rather complicated. We could have endless charts. You'd go quite crazy. In this scenario, just one table wouldn't suffice. So we've put a safety clause in so you don't exceed that 6%, and that's factored into the model. And you'll end up with something like this. So this is for soybeans. So you select your crop, so it'll be a similar one for mung beans. You just put mung beans or soyas. Your cultivar, so we'll go with Hayman. Your row spacing, a little bit narrower than the Kingaroy peanut rows, so we're down to 0.75 of a metre. Days to harvest maturity, so say 35 days. Macintosh has been on the ball and found the bugs early. Your predicted yield, we're going 3 tonnes a hectare. Your mean seed weight, now we'll have an option when you enter the cultivar, it will come up automatically. I don't know if you want an option where you can enter that yourself. No, you just auto. It probably won't make a huge amount of difference in absolute terms. Or some people think of mean seed weight as seeds per kilo. Most agronomists would think of mean seed weight that way. Again, the thing can just throw that up. Researchers think of 100 seed weight. That's just researchers being quirky. Cost of control, say $15 a hectare. So you can just play around with it and just see how sensitive changing everything is. Your likely crop value, never as much as you'd like, but say $600 a tonne, everyone will be happy with that this year. The potential edible bonus, if you're going for the edible trade, 75. Have people been offered more than that for Hayman edible? Yes. You can put in whatever. The thing will calculate the edible bonus per hectare for you. So you can see the edible bonus there is $225 a hectare, and that is way greater than the cost of control. If you're not new, agronomist maybe, not a well-seasoned agronomist, you might be feel unhappy about predicting the yield. There's a little formula we'll put there, so seeds per pod by pods per plant. You'll have to do a little bit of sampling by plants per metre. The mean seed weight will come in automatically from your variety. Just your row spacing, and the predicted yield is about 2.9, so you can see whoever was predicting the 3 was pretty accurate in this case, weren't they? So you can do a little test for yourself. Someone like Macintosh, a lot of you I'm sure could just Hugh and Smith, just put a crop, 3-4 tonnes a hectare. But that's just a little check. And we can alter the parameters. This is the bug population you had. It calculates your damage potential for all those bugs present, 2 bugs per square metre. That's the edible threshold. And are you above threshold? It'll even tell you yes or no. The crushing threshold is 0.64. And are you above threshold? Yes. It will give you the percent damage at the threshold. So the edible one is constant at 2%. At the crushing threshold, you're tolerating 2.8%. Makes sense. You don't need to know all the graphs and that behind it. You just need to punch that in and it will come up with that information. And you can alter the parameters. If we had a 1.3 tonne a hectare crop, the threshold for the crushing soybeans is 0.4, and we're tolerating a bit more damage, 4% damage. So people happy with that? This will be something you can, this is a 1 tonne a hectare crop. Are you above threshold? And in that case, the tolerable damage worked out at 7.9%, but the model is automatically capped at 6%. So it just gives you an idea of the damage that you can wear before you take action. Just very quickly. Yep. When we started, when I was asked to put the paper together, this pest hadn't appeared on the downs. We had a new pest on the downs this year again in vegetative soybeans. This was in a crop at Cecil Plains. You can see the top of the plant taken out, dead axillary buds. The critter was Etiella. So up this part, normally it's a pod borer, big problem in peanut crops, late season. Problem particularly in natto beans, which are the customers for which are very fussy. You see it, the entry hole to a pod is microscopic, you won't see it, but the exit hole's about 2 to 3 mils, and you see that little hole there, and you open it up, there's frass in the pod. But we're getting them attacking the axillary buds, small larvae attacking that, and then tunnelling in the stem, and that's one of the larger larvae in the stem. We've had a number of crops sprayed. We had an emergency permit secured for Altacor. Works very well against pod borer and mung beans. Seems to be slower acting in soybeans, but the growers who got the product on early seem to be happy with the results. Just be aware that the thing does attack pods, so we're waiting to see what happens in the crops as they approach podding. We're in the Burnett area where I work, we're seeing both the stem tunnelling behaviour, which is unusual for a pod borer, but we're starting to see pod boring behaviour as well. And if you go 4 hours east of here to Casino, Grafton, be on the lookout for this nasty fellow soybean stem fly, which is a maggot which tunnels in the stem. Of course, there's the lizard crown borer, which is a long-standing soybean pest. The larva of that's quite different to Etiella and the stem fly larva. In all the crops, this summer we've been urging people to go soft early because there has been whitefly. Have anyone had whitefly in this area? Not an issue. Starting to build in the North Coast region, building in coastal Queensland, Bundaberg, places like that. So if you can go soft early, that's to your advantage. I think the other message too is going soft early if you're using the virus product, or the new product Altacor, their ingestion products. Coverage is critical. So the higher the water volumes you can get in your spray, the better. And easy as. So I'd like to acknowledge GRDC's funding over the years. There's a lot of detailed research gone into these thresholds. I'd like to thank all my previous and past assistants. Tonya Grundy at Kingaroy DPI, who's getting the threshold model program into something you'll be able to download it off the web and use it on your iPads or whatever. Thank you.
With those thresholds, you're assuming even sampling and even damage in the crop, and often you get hot spots in crop.
Yeah.
And I suppose it'd be interesting what other people think, but you're really you sort of worry that with those hot spots, if you come to harvest it and they sample, you get uneven sampling where the damage is in that whole crop. I mean, that's always a concern.
It is a big, they sort of preempted one of the questions I asked was, what's the elephant in the room? And you've hit it. The elephant in the room is the sampling. And there's no sort of easy way with bugs. You can have a lot, even in small blocks, a lot down one end of the paddock and a lot, and nothing up the other end or everything in between. I guess you've got to cover that with, you do have to sample all parts of the paddock because you never know. You might have nothing near the road and a lot down near the creek line. So you do need to do that. The other issue too is with the nymphs. So the nymphs are terribly clumped, particularly with green vegetable bugs. So you'll have an egg raft with 100 to 150 eggs all in one space. They're not spread uniformly or more uniformly like here eggs. across the rows. And so that's why often early on we miss the young nymphs. But yeah, I know it's a pain, and it'd be nice if we had a drone or something that could fly over the crop and just give a recording of what's there, but there's no sort of easy way around that. I guess one factor you do have is just take regular samples, and that increases the chance of picking up the early nymphs. And the other thing in our favour is that the thresholds are based on damage over a long period of time. So if you miss some of the bugs in the early counts, you still have plenty of time to take action, and it's not going to affect your quality. If people like, we do have sequential sampling data, and we can put that online and just show you how many samples you need to take for a given level of accuracy. It's rather frightening, but yeah, people just need to be aware of that. And I guess growers who are paying consultants need to be aware that, yeah, it is very time consuming, and I guess you pay what you get for.
I guess I've got one, Hugh. Should we just go in and not worry about sampling and spray it, flowering, and clean everything up?
No, and and I think the question too, if you go in early at flowering, yep. No, there's no need to go in. You need to know what is in your crop, because you might have Heelys, you might have Etiella, you might have whatever. You need to be aware of the total pest complex in your crop, because if you go in and there's nothing, if there were no bugs, for example, and you had Heelys, you would go into an SP and you're likely to flare them, or if it's a high whitefly risk year, you're likely to flare whitefly. So you need to know what is in the crop. Other thing is too, we do have leeway. If you've got bugs coming in early, say at flowering, they'll be laying eggs. And we know with the SPs that if they're at the egg stage when you spray, a lot of them will escape. By the time they hatch, the product is broken down, there's no contact on them, and you won't get a kill. And then later down the track, you wonder, well, where did these things come from? They were present at the time of spraying, but they're eggs. So it's better to wait a little while. You can get into early pod fill before you spray, let those eggs hatch, and then you're targeting those nymphs. And when the nymphs are very small, their damage potential is that at that time is very little. First instars cause no damage. Second instars cause sweet olive, expletive oil, and then it increases as you go to the later instars. So most of your damage would be caused by the fourth and fifth instar nymphs.
Huey, I'm looking at it on a catchment side of things. Can you have complicating factors such as a neighbouring crop, which is hosts similar sorts of pests, impacting on that sort of particular paddock?
You can. We've seen that in regions where people had sequential soybean plantings. Thinking of some at Mackay where they had green manure soybeans, and it wasn't very good for the grain crops next door because the bugs just moved from one to the other, and as one crop matured, they went into the next one.
Yeah, that sort of raises a question. I'm sure there's lots of studies that they've done green bridge crops or how far do these insects fly, and trying to keep that hygiene aspect and not just look at the paddock per se, but what's around.
Yes, if you've got a lot of weed hosts of bugs, for example, that's going to be a risk factor early season. So it's one of the reasons if you have a very dry year like this, on average the bug populations are lower because there's less sort of fewer hosts early on in the season. But then again, I guess if you've got very few crops in the ground, your crop might be a magnet for... So just scout them regularly. They can come in very quickly. We've had crops, trials, start of the week, nothing. Friday, yeah, heaps of them. So the adults are very mobile. The problem's going to be the detection of the things. So at the potting phase, the most obvious sign is when you've got an exit hole. By then it's too late. So you'd probably be looking for maybe the discoloured pods coming into the crop. If you know what the moth looks like. If you've got a very big flight, influx of moths, as we do sometimes in peanuts late season, and I guess peanuts are an easier crop because they're quite low, you go in and you see the moths flying everywhere and you know you're going to have a problem. So they're quite small grubs, so they're damaging far fewer seeds than, say, Healy will. The other thing you'd have to, while we have a permit for Altacor, just be aware that there's a 21-day withholding period. So you'd need to take action before, 21 days before harvest.